Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Resilient Riches. Today, we have the Jewish Money Matters podcast host, the Jewish Oprah, the Jewish expert on dating and just amazing love of Judaism and money and bringing everything together. She's an international speaker. She's originally from Costa Rica, right?
Puerto Rico.
I'm sorry. It's a worse soccer team, but we're very excited to have Yael Trusch on today. We're going to go into a lot of different topics. We're going to talk about what it means to be Jewish, what it means to have money in your life, how that actually matters. We're not just going to talk about traditional financial topics. So today, if you're interested to know really how the Jews think about money, how they've built wealth, and what are the pitfalls also when you do become religious. So we're going to go through a bunch of that today. Stay tuned to the end of the episode and make sure that Yael hasn't written her book yet, but when she does, make sure you're the first person to buy it. She's got a very successful money guide, and she's got great coaching clients, and she's been really an amazing speaker, a really big advocate for financial literacy. So we thought we'd bring an amazing treat for you today. Without further ado, Yael, please give us your background.
Thank you, Yair. Thank you, David. It is a pleasure to be here. So yes, I am, as you said, the host of Jewish Money Matters podcast. It's been a beautiful journey and started with my own experience with money, believe it or not, right? I grew up in Puerto Rico. I got my MBA and I got married. And when I got married, I totally thought that money would be something that I would hand over to my husband, even though I had a career related to money. I worked in finance. I worked in investment banking. As I said, I have an MBA. But something in me said, ooh, I got married. Let him take care of it. Well, that kind of worked really nicely until the recession of '08. And suddenly things started getting a little tight here and there. And my husband started asking questions about the spending and this and that. And I suddenly had to put my big girl skirt on and say, 1 second. I really like this man. I really like this marriage. I worked very hard to get to this place in my life where I'm in a very good relationship that I want to keep forever. I'm not going to be one of those people. I'm not going to be a statistic. I'm not going to be one of those people where money becomes a sticking point and a point of division in my relationship. So I have to learn what this is all about. And what I discovered along with my husband is that the personal finance part was actually, interestingly enough, the easy part. Although, as you well said, we both are advocates. We all are here in this Zoom room advocates for financial literacy. It's super important, and I'll be the first one to say it. But that wasn't really the hard part. The harder part was the mindset shift, the emotional shift. And what I found is that I hadn't realized, but my Judaism, which I practice with so much faith and devotion, and I had come into as an adult, was actually something that really could inform and was there to inform so much of my thinking and feeling and my thoughts, speech, and actions when it came to money. And I had never tapped into that. And that was one of the biggest discoveries. And once I realized that Judaism has so much to say about the way we relate to money and behave with money. It's like everything started changing. That was like
an example. Give us an example of how you how that is.
Absolutely. So example number one, right? My husband and I used to be givers, and we probably, gave considerable amounts of money to charity. I think every Jew it's a giving person. It's in our spiritual DNA. What I hadn't internalized is that we as Jews have a different way of giving than the normative personal finance would say, right? Normative personal finance would say, this is how you allocate your money. Number one, you save, invest. Number two, you spend. And then if you have left over and you're a giving, caring individual, of course, by all means, you give. And I realized, 1 second, we have a completely different paradigm. Judaism flips this paradigm on its head. We Jews give first. Meaning to say, if I went on a vacation to Thailand and this is a recession, I can't necessarily just give because I don't have where to give from. Well, that's not really the mindset. The mindset is, I'm always going to be in a giving mode because anytime I have something that God blesses me with a certain amount of income, 10% of that income, and God willing, even to a point of 20%, is already designated for me to share with others. So it totally flipped that paradigm, right? So that's one particular example where even if I could say, well, I was a giver, was I really being a giver in the Jewish sense, where really this is something that I take very seriously and very methodical, the mitzvah of Meiser and or Chomesh, right? So that was one thing. Another example.
So just a comment. I mean, the Jewish idea is that, we're givers. That's how we're going to get. So, God,
Exactly.
and that's the one mitzvah, the one commandment we have, that we can make a deal with God.
Exactly.
If I give charity, so, I'm going to give $1 to the guy as I'm leaving shul. Give me about $10,000 from God, and because I gave that dollar. Okay, God, let's make a deal. But I think that's the mindset we're coming from.
And it's even more, I find that even more profound that when you are giving and you actually set up an automated place of giving, so every month you're just moving money out of your account and it becomes a just part of it, you do not get the ego of all this money that I am making is because of my back and because of my speech, and I'm so eloquent and I look so good and I network so well, and it eliminates all this ego in you.
Yes.
And as we had on the podcast last week, Paul Robinson, somebody who makes significant money, the less he started caring about the money, the more money he actually made. 100%. So it leads to so much just on that one example. Example number 2. Yael, my friend, example number 2.
100%. So you just gave us a perfect segue to example number 2, because you alluded to the fact that we're actually getting out of the picture this attachment that we have to money and clinging to it and recognizing that it's coming from a higher source. It's coming from God, right? So I get myself out of the picture. I bring God into the picture. So second example is, I was a woman of faith. I kept Shabbat. I kept kosher, all the things, you could say. But I really started questioning, does that mean I'm a woman of trust? There's something much greater than just saying, okay, I'm a woman of faith. I believe there's a God. There's a God that is good, that runs the world. But do I completely rely on God? And I think that piece, which is what we call in Hebrew bitachon, is a huge transformative piece. And for many of us, I would say for all of us, it's constant work. It's constant work to get out of our, kind of need to control situations and our attachment to our businesses, to our, accomplishments, to our, wits and capabilities and all that, and understand that really it's God is the one who's doing everything, and that I have to only exclusively rely on him. And it brings back such a big sense of joy into our work, actually, which is something that people don't realize. When you can actually show up to work and say, I'm reaching out to this client, I'm doing this new project, but I'm not getting myself attached to that client, attached to that result. I'm actually going to enjoy the process much better. But and anyway, it's for me, bitachon has been like completely transformative. And I can tell you, the previous Yael, coming from the world of achievement, coming from the world of going to really good schools and working on Wall Street and blah, 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 all that wasn't part of my mindset, That really wasn't.
Some people will say that that's the real purpose for us to be here even. That's why God even put us here, is to have that challenge, to constantly, and we have that constant challenge because God keeps putting new ones in front of us.
Yeah.
That doesn't bother me anymore. So something else comes about, which is tougher for me to overcome. Right. And that's what's going to bother me now. And that's sometimes, if you turn the narrative, you turn it to the what really is going on. That's really what we're here for.
Yeah, I love that you said that, David, because God put us in a world of nature. So constantly we're going to get distracted, and we're going to think that world of nature of the business that I built and the client roster that I have, or whatever it is, right? That's the reality. And that's what I have to be reliant upon. And it's all a fallacy, but we're off, because we're immersed in it. And by the way, God wants us to be, right? God wants us to be in this world. We're supposed to be, really.
Otherwise he wouldn't put us here.
Exactly. So I often say, like, it's this dance of being right here in the world, but being completely plugged above. That's kind of the
challenge.
That's the challenge of the Jew, and the beautiful dance that the Jew has to play. And we have the tools in our toolkit to do it successfully. But like I said, we have to go to them. We have to learn them. We have to work through them, access them. And for me, it was a really transformative experience, not just financially, but also in my relationship with my husband. So both in my relationship with money as well as in my relationship with my husband, which is why, like you said, Yair, I deal a lot with couples and dating and relationships because money does become a source of tension in marriage when it doesn't really have to, if we learn how to communicate around money and we learn to shift our perspectives around money. And I mean, there's a lot that we can say about that, but yeah, thankfully, this is where I am today. And just to sum up this piece, the reason I ended up hosting the Jewish Money Matters podcast is because I had another podcast and I had a lot of speaking engagements and a lot of writing pieces that I was doing for different publications. And the more I spoke to people and related to my audience, I realized that money was a challenge that people were having in the Jewish world, whether observant or non-observant. Okay. And nobody was talking about it and nobody was addressing it. And I started testing the waters and speaking more openly about it. And it was literally like, give me more, give me more, give me more. And I was like, okay, God, I get the message. I have to really go all in. And that's when I really went all in and started developing my business around this.
Well, I'll just say one thing from your husband's point of view, which I went through myself. The fact that you gave that job to him, that's hard for him. That's a hard job. And that he doesn't have, and that, you say to him, oh, you just look after it. And I just want to go about my business, but you look after this because you're the man. It's a very difficult and lonely feeling for him. And then if it becomes difficult, he feels that sense of failure, which can lead to not sharing with you, not communicating, because he doesn't want to say, oh, I failed at this job that you gave me, when really it's got to be a partnership. It's got to be the communication, and both sides need the support from each other.
100%. You couldn't have said it better, David. And I see this constantly. And you said the key word here. It's supposed to be a partnership. This is not about taking power, owner, control, anything like that. It's about coming together. There might be one of the spouses who is more savvy at the investing or better at the spreadsheets or whatever. The point here is the point is to think together, to make money something that if God gave me this resource, gave us as a couple this resource to build a life together, to change the world together, then we have to pay attention to it together. Then we have to be mindful together. Then we have to say, you know what are our values? Like really get really honest with ourselves. What are our real values? And are we aligning our money with our values? Are we actually allocating the money the way our values dictate? Because very often we could look at our bank statements and even our calendar, and we'd be surprised to see, actually, this is not like my money is not really financing what I say are the things that are of value to me, and those are very important conversations that need to be continuously happening.
So we're behavioral financial advisors, which means that we actually will coach clients through a values assessments and then align their financial planning alongside with their values. So the first thing that we do is actually break down and do a game that can get people down to the 5 values, and then we really go from there. And what I'm hearing here is that you found that you wanted to align your values. One of them was faith, spirituality, God. My dad has a very similar point, which is why you two just fell in love with each other. But you both had that similar point. And the second side that I heard was the values of community and the values of giving. So once you start doing that, and once you start, and that's what I want everyone to understand, is when you break down what your values are, all of a sudden you become more motivated to make more money.
Yes.
People don't understand that making money is not that hard, but you need motivation to do it. So if you align your desire to make money, what motivates you, all together, then all of a sudden you'll work harder. You'll be less tired. Like I don't come home tired from my job. I go home and I go straight to my kids, or like job. It's like my life. And that's something because I've aligned what I love to do, what I enjoy doing, and I wake up every day and I enjoy doing. And same with, I could speak for my dad, is that we both enjoy what we do, and it keeps us aligned to our values. What is your third example?
Before you go on to the example, just to mention, I can make a comment. Of course, I can't resist.
Yeah, he's
a little bit younger. And Yair doesn't let me speak too much about my past career because he says it gets too long and boring, which whatever. But it's not so easy to find that, when you're, especially at a young age, it's not so easy to find that career or that position that aligns with your values and that you don't see as work. Yair happens to be lucky that way. I'm not sure if he fully doesn't, it's hard to fully appreciate it until you've gone through multiple different careers, and then you find what you really want to do. It's not so easy.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a tip for that and for the audience before I go through my third example, which we already sort of touched upon, but I'll rephrase it. When you look into the chapter 3 of the Gate of Trust, it is actually one of the chapters that I wish every career counselor in every high school would actually, have a session on with their students, because it gives you exactly how you should think about going about choosing your career. It tells you, if the premise is that God is going to send the money, no matter what, because he's the source of the money. The source is not your Harvard degree, it's not your business, it's not your job, it's not your manager, it's not, right? The source is God. Then God says, I have given you certain talents and capabilities and opportunities in this world. Go find your channel for livelihood in the place where your talents lie, your passions lie, and your tolerance lie. And once you can nail those 3 things together, then you're off to the races. It doesn't say ever where they pay the most, because again, you're going to do so much better if it's aligned with what you love, with what you're good at, with what you're talented and you can tolerate. So I think those are really good career clues that I wish myself I had gotten when I was early on. But to go back to the question of the third
Sorry,
thing,
just to interrupt one more time.
Of course.
Just to throw in there, and I think you'll like this comparison. It's like the same idea. Like you make a bracha, but you have to have like bread on the table, because you need something for it to fall on. Yeah. So the same thing here, you have to have the blessing of God to fall on those talents that he's given you. The same idea. It can't fall on something that's empty, or it can, but it has to fall. That's why you put bread on the table and you make a bracha where there's something there already.
I think also that there's jobs now, let's say for art majors, Disney, Pixar, and all these other animation studios are pulling out these art majors and paying them at a base salary of $165,000 a year. Amazing. So it used to be like an art major, you're basically outdoorsman, as Seinfeld says, or like there is so much opportunity now in different fields that didn't exist 20 years ago. So understanding that there are opportunities out there and you're not just going to get stuck. Psychology degree does not necessarily mean a psychologist, or marketing. A poli-sci degree doesn't mean that you have to run as a state senator. There's a lot more to it than what used to be, because the world has changed and careers have changed so drastically.
And I'll take it a step further. Yes, that is very, very true. But beyond that, you have to believe in possibility. You have to believe that you're plugged to an infinite creator who has all the possibilities ready and available for you. You just have to go do what you've been created for. I mean, I know it's work, it's a high level, but it's something to think about. Now, the third thing that I remember was a big shift was something that we just touched upon, which is this idea of the values, right? Again, so number 1, the meiser, the giving, the idea of, how do we exactly give, the bitachon, or the trust piece. And then like, what are my values? And are my financial statements actually aligning with my values? And for that is when I realized, maybe we should introduce into our relationship this concept of a money date that I know you guys talk about. I talk about it all the time, but there should be times aligned, times assigned in our schedule where these are the only times when we actually talk about money. But it's not just about money. It's not just about numbers. It's not just about the spreadsheet. It's beyond that. It's like, what do we truly value? And then again, asking the harder question, are we financing those values? Because if we're not, then we're not using our money, the blessing that God is giving us, in the way that we're meant to, and we're never going to be happy and satisfied.
I love that. Sorry, I just blanket agree. I do love that. It is very hard, especially when people come from different cultures. It is a very big challenge, but understanding and sitting down and actually having those conversations and being open about them actually create a little bit of love, because you realize why you actually got married.
Totally.
Because we do it pre-marriage. We go, what do you want? I want kids. I want to do this. I want to buy a house. And then while you're doing it, you forget that actually happens. And then next thing you know, you're 15 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, it doesn't really make a difference. You forgot that's actually why you fell in love with each other at the beginning. It is romantic. My dad's known for his romance with my mom. He wrote her a little love card the other day for the first time in 34 years. So I was very proud of him. I framed it.
You know what the issue is? The issue is you get mired in the detail of life. And Yair has gone through this with his younger son. you're up at 3 a.m, 5 days in a row, you're not maybe at your sharpest or your best, so you're getting involved with, you've got a big bill coming in because something happened that you didn't expect. Things, you get panicky, you get scared. It's a fearful thing. And this is where it becomes difficult to remember, those type of things. Like, how is that going to happen? How am I going to pay that bill? How am I going to, now I'm mired in all of this, and I'm not going to get a bailout, or it's not going to happen, or maybe it will happen. But that's where it becomes, it gets scary.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I'll tell you two things about that. Number one, I'll leave a resource with our listeners about the 10 tips for money date success, because this is, to your point, David, this is why it's so important that this be a regular thing that happens on the calendar. And just like dating our spouse is so important, this is the time where we date our spouse and our money, which is completely separate from the time we date our spouse, right? And I always tell people, if you just had a baby, or you have, 2 kids under 2 or whatever, I don't expect your money dates to be necessarily every week. Like in my stage of life where my kids are older, they happen every week. It's part of our routine and they need to happen every week. But maybe they need to happen at least once a month. There needs to be a time where we get on the same page, where we know what's flying, where we know what the cash flow is, so that we are doing things in agreement and understanding why we're doing them. And what's interesting about what you just said, Yair, about the cultures, my husband and I just came back actually Monday night from a Jewish Latin retreat for couples. And one of the sessions, we led 2 sessions. We led a session on bitachon, on trust, and we led a session on money date. And it was so incredible to see the couples right there in our eyes. We started with the process of the money date, and we started uncovering their money stories. And then we walk them through how to define to work through defining their values. And it was so beautiful to see these couples work through these really interesting and important questions and learn about each other, about the way they actually grew up with money, what they saw at home, what are the experiences that have shaped their mindset around money. It was absolutely fabulous. We all loved it.
Where's your husband
You're probably
from?
a super celebrity.
Where's your husband from? Is he also from South America?
No, he's actually American. So that actually made it really funny, because it was like, this gringo, quote unquote gringo, who married the Latin person. So there were obviously cultural differences. So he's actually from Houston.
Not that big of a difference, but that is actually, I actually do have a good question for you while I'm thinking of it. What is the difference between the Latin Jewish community and the American Jewish community?
When it comes to money, or when it comes to, because there are many differences.
There's many differences. There's definitely a little more spice when it comes to the Latin women than the American women. But let's say in money, just because, so we'll stay on topic.
When you talk about spice, let me tell you something. My husband till yesterday was saying we laughed so much. He's like, I didn't understand half the things were going on, but you guys have the ability to laugh. It literally, we spend the whole weekend laughing. There's something about that spice, that joy of living, that, I'm sorry, it's very Latin, and we take a lot of pride in it, and it's very enjoyable. But when it comes to money, it's an interesting question, and I have thought about it actually. There is a subtlety, and I'm not sure that everybody's going to agree with me. And obviously, generalizations are tough, right? And they fall short. But something that I've noticed is that in the Latin community, in the Jewish Latin community, there's a certain sense of comfort with money, a certain sense of familiarity, and there's a comfort with being around wealth. And I'm not saying that means that everybody's wealthy. It means there's a comfort level with money, whereas perhaps I've noticed, and I'm a very much an American person also. I mean, I've been in this country for many, many years. I left home when I was 17, 18. That perhaps maybe I noticed that in more American culture, there's a little bit of, I'm trying to look for the English terms, but a discomfort in the sense that maybe people come into wealth and then it needs to be like overly shown or overly like visible. Whereas I find personally that in Latin America, like it's shown, but it doesn't have to be shown. Like it doesn't, like there's like this sense like it's okay to live with beauty and with wealth, and it doesn't have to be there. Again, the word is comfort. We're very comfortable around wealth.
Yeah, your comfort having money in the U.S. You really.
I think you mean you don't need to be ostentatious when you become wealthy.
There's no need for ostentatious. There's no need for showing it off. It's not unfamiliar. And again, it could be there's a Sephardi influence there. It could be many
I think it comes back to what we talked about, because we know it's coming. Ultimately, even if a person is not religious or doesn't subconsciously, part of our psyche as a nation is we know it comes from God.
And you know what, David? I think you're onto something right there, because one of the things that is very much a part of our psyche as Latin people, and again, I didn't grow up religious, and most of my friends are not observant, not nearly as observant. There is a psyche of everything that comes out of our mouth is thank God, please God, thank God. Like in Spanish, like even my husband will say it. Everything is, every other word is thank God, and so there is a consciousness that might have to do with that. I think you're onto something.
Well, bringing it, Dad, you're a genius. Going back to the point of my dad complaining about that I was not my best when my son was waking up at 3 a.m. every day. My son was sick, and he woke up like at 3 a.m. Like
always an excuse.
3 days in a row while we were staying at my parents, while we were homeless at my parents' house. My dad was a wreck. He was destroyed. He had I had 6 kids, no endurance for no sleep for consistent nights.
Then you wonder, how did we do it when we had?
I don't know. I'm still getting over it. My last 2 were twins. I don't know how. I'm still getting over that trauma.
God gives us the strength.
Now they're 25.
They're still. It makes sense. But it does lead me to the question of you weren't religious before. My dad wasn't religious before. Was how people view the Jews. One is that they all have money, and 2, that they all live in the same lifestyle. We do not live in the same lifestyle, and we do not all have money. Yes, there is a great concentration of it. Fantastic. And we have these types of leaders like you, Kosher Money, all these other leaders that are actually talking about money. That's something that we do very consistently. But it's a real awakening when you do become religious. You went from not religious community to a religious community. What were the challenges that you faced? And it's a question for you, Yael, and to my dad, that you faced when all of a sudden you were in a completely different culture and different community, but you were still Jewish.
Yeah. When it comes to, I don't know if it's the challenge of being in another culture and being Jewish. I mean, with that, I can talk about, anybody who becomes observant. And I was working, in the business world, and I was doing my MBA when I was becoming religious. All of those, dancing that dance and dealing with the responsibilities of being in the world and saying, what I have to leave at 4:00 on Friday, right? And next Tuesday, Wednesday, I have a holiday that you've never heard of, right? And I'm going to be away, right? Those are things that we experience, and we pray a lot, and we take a deep breath, and we say, okay, somehow I'm going to make through. And I have one really beautiful anecdote. I remember when I graduated my MBA at NYU, I had a very good friend from Peru, not Jewish, not a Jewish woman, and we were standing in line to get our diplomas at graduation, and she says to me, Yael, I want to be very honest with you. I never thought you were going to make it. I have never met a person like you in my life. I said, what do you mean? And she says, I just didn't know, like, how is this girl so committed to her faith? And how is she going to do this MBA in the same way that I'm doing it? There's no way she's going to succeed here. And here you are. And for me, it was like, wow, like really? So it was a very interesting, kind of conversation. But I'll tell you, not something that I personally experience as a shock, but I know for many people, and I think David and I talked about it offline a little bit, and we agreed on this one. Many people experience this idea that you become more observant, and nobody kind of told you that comes at a higher cost, right? There's going to be a lot of more money that you're going to be investing in, tuition for your kids, and in kosher food, and in all the,
I had 4 building funds at one point. 4 building funds. They're asking me for money.
How many did you pay at the same time?
But I don't say that with a sense of despondency and criticism. I say it actually, I have a different take on this. My take is, I tell people all the time, I struggle, I also have, my life cost a lot of money. That's the truth. Most of our lives cost a lot of money. We invest in these things that are very costly. Well, you know what? They're very valuable. It's not Walmart, it's Neiman Marcus, or it's Saks Fifth Avenue. I mean, it's God's Torah. So it comes at a price. So I take it. And I think it irks people because there's a tendency to criticize and blame the system and blame the schools and blame the kosher restaurants. And I'm like, hello, who is creating the schools? Who is creating the like? Let's stop blaming and let's say, well, God, if you want me to do this, then obviously you're footing the bill. And I'm going to go straight to you and rely on you that you're going to help me through that. Right. And I think, at least for me, it's worked out to be a much better attitude than to be cynical and despondent about, oh, the cost of being Jewish. No, actually, being Jewish is beautiful. It's a beautiful life. And yes, it's precious and it's costly. And so what?
I was talking actually to a friend of mine, and a little bit, and we're just talking about how much the tuition. He says he's happy to pay that money. If he has it, he's happy to pay that because especially my kids, they went through the religious education. He's happy to do it.
Yeah, and you know what, David? Even if we don't have it, even if today you don't have it, you still have to be happy. You still have to be happy that that's what you get to pay. And that's what you're working towards, right? That you're running a business. Even if today you don't have the $20,000 to give the school, you have to be happy that this is the school that this is the kind of education that I get to finance for my kids.
Yeah, exactly.
It's this gratitude concept of it all. Dad, did you feel also a big trauma? I don't want to say trauma. What was the big changes in your life that you felt when you became religious?
Well, when I became religious, I was still in business school in Toronto. I grew up in Toronto. I was still in business school. I became religious in my fourth year of undergrad. It was in Canada, and college was in Canada was a little bit different because they had grade 13 still there. So the BA was 3 years. So I was in my fourth year, was an honors business, and I met some people, and then to me, it saved me, to tell you the truth, because to me, it was like before that, I felt very despondent. What was I doing? What was my aim? What was I doing it all for? So now, I finally have a purpose. I finished my undergrad and I went to Orsameach for 3 years. I was in Israel for 3 years learning, which totally transformed me. And I got married when I was there. And by the time we left, mom was pregnant with my oldest son. And we came back to Toronto, went back to school, did my MBA in a year in the 8 months in Toronto. And then it became like crazy.
I love that you said that because it reminded me of my own experience when I was becoming religious. I was actually, the wake up call happened when I was in investment banking. I remember at some point, it must have been the middle of the night, I had this realization where I looked around me and I said, oh my goodness, I don't really want to, and I'm not knocking the investment banking industry. I'm just making a point about my own experience with, what you want to do with your life. I said, I don't want to be like anyone in this environment that I have. Like, I don't have anybody here that I can say, I want to be like this person when I grow up. And I remember that was like a big wake up call, meaning like, if I'm spending so much time dedicating to an institution, why is it that I don't have life role models in here? And it got me in this thinking. And I started to find that a lot of the Jewish women that I was meeting that were more observant really were everything that I kind of was taught to be. They taught me to be assertive and they taught me to be, educated and all these things. And yet there was a missing piece. They also had solid family. They had Shabbat. They had all these beautiful things. And I was like, there's something in that recipe that I'm kind of like headed in a different direction. And if I don't go explore what that is, I don't want to miss out. And my mother, who was an attorney for many, many years, I remember I had moved to Miami. I had left the bank and I moved to a VC firm in Miami to work for them. And I told my mother, Ma, I just don't know I told my mother, I know that what I want is I want to get married and have a family. And I thought she was going to be like, that's crazy. And she told me words that I will never forget. She said, I'm so proud of you because if I had to do it all over again, I would do it differently. And for my mother, who was a very accomplished attorney, to tell me that, it just gave me the green light to go explore that there is something more to life. And I found it in my own faith. And when I became observant in Miami, I had already gotten accepted to my MBA and I had a full scholarship. And I was really scared to go. I said, there's no way. How am I going to keep this up? I really like this life, but I can't go back to business school. What am I going to do there? Like, how am I going to do this? And my rabbi and my rebbitzin sat me down and they said, you're going. You are going. The point of being Jewish is to be in the world. You're not staying here with us. We're not like, you can go to New York City. You can go back and you can do your MBA and you can succeed. And they were absolutely right. And I'm eternally grateful that they gave me that guidance, because a part of me was like, okay, now I have this life. I'm just going to leave, and they were right. No, that's not the point. The point is you have to go there and elevate that environment. You have to be in the world. You're not giving up that.
But even when I was in yeshiva, or I was in Or Sameach in Jerusalem for 3 years, I was always going to come back. They always talked about making a living.
Sorry, Dad, just to clarify, when he meant learning, he was learning Torah. That was his full-time, basically like his full-time profession. He was just learning just like spirituality and God and godliness in Torah in the Old Testament.
I was basically on a sabbatical for like 3 years. That's the way I sort of looked at it, but I forgot my point now anyway.
Basically, you were learning a lot.
I had a reason.
No, but I think you were saying, David, that even there they taught you that.
Oh, right. So even there, it was the point. So and just to give you a quick story, I know Yair doesn't let me tell long stories. Quick story. So when I wanted to go out with my wife, we were set up by mutual friends. It wasn't really like a shidduch, but it was sort of like a shidduch. I had to meet her rabbi, who was the Biela Rebbe from Lugano. So I'm thinking, I better sharpen up on my Gemara, because he's going to ask me, like, he's going to be me a big test on it. So I better study it and make sure I'm up there. When I got there, it's like I was getting like grilled by my accountant. Like, what's your tax return going to be like? How are you going to support Lorraine when you get married? Like, where, what's your plan here? What are you planning on doing? And then I was thinking I would do my MBA. I might come back. But if some miracle came and somebody gave me like $1 billion, I would just wanted to stay in Israel and learn, of course. But, that's not what happened. But, so he was like putting that together. Like, that's very important that you're in the world. Again, you're in the world. How are you going to pay those bills? Like, what are you going to do?
Some perspective of that would be he was trying to see how much donation he can get for allowing you to marry my mother. But
down way later on down the road.
How much did you get? Like $100? Like,
no, well, now I'm on the monthly thing. He just takes it off now he takes it on my credit card.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to give it. Happy.
There you go.
The honor, and that's the value. You're the one that created the religious movement. Thank you. But let's talk a little bit on some tangibles. We spoke about a lot of people just going into and understanding faith and really aligning money with your values. Can you give us just a quick snippet of the Jewish, the date, the kosher date, or the money date that you're having? Just like 10 topics, 10 points that you can give in a minute, and then we can add some also on the Klyman side.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I look at it. I'm not going to give you the 10 tips for success. I'll give, you can download those, but I'll tell you the process. And the process, the way I see it, is a 4-part process, meaning I'm not saying we start a money date and you put it on your schedule for tomorrow, Friday at 10 a.m. and you right away say to your spouse, okay, show me the numbers, show me the investment account, show me the savings account, show me. This is like, we never start with the numbers. The numbers we're going to get to, and we're going to be dealing with them the rest of our lives. But before that, some other things need to happen that are very important. Step number one in this money date process, which is going to be for life, is getting to know your money story, yours and your spouse, and getting to know each other, because like we said before, that's what's going to create empathy and understanding. And that's what's going to allow you to say, you know what, some of the things that make my own money story, I want to keep, and some I just want to rewrite. Like, I don't need to carry this garbage from my family of origin, right? Or from my past experience. I get to rewrite my own story now with my spouse. So it's a very important process to get to to get to an understanding of where are we coming from? How do we actually think about money, and what were the experiences that shaped our thinking about money? Because then we can understand how later on a money conversation, you might get triggered by something in a way that you never thought it would trigger you, right? And your spouse now understands why you're getting triggered. And instead of it becoming an explosion, the reaction is going to be, I get it. I remember in a money date, I don't remember what we were discussing, but maybe it was like a transaction that didn't happen at the time that I thought should happen, or whatever it was. And I remember I reacted I don't know what I said, but I definitely overreacted. And my husband went like this, and he patted me down, like he touched me, and he said, Yael, I'm not your father. You're fine. But it came from a place of he understood what types of things I had seen in my own home that made me nervous. Before, he wouldn't have had that understanding if we hadn't gone through this process, and he would have gotten really hurt and really offended, and it would have been a whole explosion, right? So getting to know our money stories, that's step number one of the process. Then we move to doing the exercise that you guys say you also do with your clients, which again, I also do because it's crucial, is what are my values, right? And getting to those 5 core values. And of course, we have more, but really trying to get to the essence and understanding each other's values, because those are going to shape how we are going to hopefully now then give intentionality to our goals. So once we have our money story pretty clear, once we have our values very clear, then we can actually go and say, well, what are my financial goals, right? And how do they have to be supported by those set of values. And then we can get to a process of looking at our numbers and saying, okay, where are we holding now, right? And how are we then going to create the systems and the strategy that then is going to help us get to those goals. But you see, the numbers piece is not the beginning. And sometimes the men in the room will be like, what do you mean? We're not getting to the budget yet? Or I'm like, no, but this is actually going to help you in the long run. Like, if you really want her to get to the numbers, do this fluffy stuff now.
We don't want to talk. We don't want to
Right?
talk. Whenever my wife says, let's talk, it's not something I'm interested in.
Yeah, exactly. But I saw it with the couples in Florida when we were in this retreat. The men actually really loved it because they realized this is actually going to get me to get her to where I want, which is to understand the numbers and how my business, I have ups and downs, and I don't always have the same cash flow or whatever it might be. But if you tell her, some of the men say, you have to give me a budget. Show me. I had a guy in Florida who said, I want her to give me a profit and loss statement of our home, just like we have in our business. I was like, no, Danny, it's not going to work like that.
Is like she a CPA? Is like she a financial accountant?
You think like that, but she doesn't think like that. By the way, there are many women who do, but I'm saying in this particular case, so let's ease into it. And he was the first one who, after the process, loved it. So going back to the 4 parts, number 1, the money story. Number 2, the values. Number 3, the goals. And number 4, the numbers. And again, money dates are going to happen throughout your entire marriage. They're going to be regularly scheduled on your calendar. And there's many tips that I give, like, have an agenda, set the mood, if you need to have chocolate, if you need to go to a park, if you just, it doesn't always have to be at your desk or the kitchen table, but then there's more
framing.
To say on that. Right.
It's framing conversation and
the conversation.
How we like it and just what we find success for people and what I do with ourselves and our own spouses is that we do those 4. And it's very interesting that you're saying it, because it's exactly really what we do for our clients. Like, we don't really talk about the numbers until we actually get to where they want to get to.
Yeah.
And then we can go into the numbers. And then what I really like is it's really hard to accomplish those goals. It's really hard to do those goals. So set up as much automation as you possibly can to get. The second side is what I find super helpful is that if your money date is very, very long, again, automate the part that is the lengthiest, which is setting up the spreadsheets. So there's mint.com. We use something called Right Capital. We use it for our clients. That's all automated. Everything's like updated in real time. So just finding those little software technologies can really, really help, but you have to do the work, and you can't automate love, and you can't automate conversation with your spouse and connectivity. So that's really the main thing.
Yeah. And I love, can I just chime in with 2 things about this? I love that you use those words, the love and the connectivity, because that's the whole goal, is that you're going to create so much connection with your spouse. But, on a very practical level, like you said, guys, in order to achieve certain goals, we have to create systems around them, right? So the more we can automate things and not have to rely on our own willpower for money to get moved to the investment account or the savings account, that's like such a practical tip right there. And then I always say, talking about money is going to be draining, and who wants to do that? Limit it. Don't have these money dates for longer than an hour. It has to be 30 minutes to an hour, and that's it. And guess what? They're happening next week anyway, or in 2 weeks. So whatever's left unfinished, it's going to get done. It's going to get done in the next one.
Agreed. Yeah, you really have to limit it. It's really hard. People try to get it all done. It's not a business meeting.
No.
Yeah, you've had this incredible journey and this energy of you and you've given us a little bit of your life, but there's defining moments in people's lives. What would be one of the defining moments in your life that allowed you to be successful, that allowed you to accomplish these resilient goals that you've set for yourselves and that you give to your clients? What is that defining moment in your life? And I hope we can get something that you don't discuss on your podcast normally. That's something you give us just for us.
Wow. Wow. I'm thinking of two. I think becoming a mother. I think becoming a mother was really, really, it made me into a much better person. Like it made me, kind of like really realize, oh, there is, I'm the type of, like, I say it
There's
not as an, now I'm going
in there,
to,
Dad. She's going to give it to us.
huh?
She's going to give us the meaty defining moment.
Yeah, but I see it not like as I'm giving myself over to my children, but as like I raised the bar for myself because I have to now really live up to my potential. What is my potential? So that these kids see potential, right? And so most of my decisions in my life, if not all, have always been with a mindset of, what is this exemplifying for my children? What are they learning from the behavior of their parents? Another really defining moment beyond becoming a mother, again, my husband is like my biggest partner in everything. I have to be very honest with you. When I first had the idea of starting to talk about money in the Jewish world, I was actually terrified because who does that? This was 8 years ago almost. This is way before kosher money and way before, like, really, here I am. I'm a woman in the Orthodox Jewish world. I'm about tshuva. I came into, religion, and money is not something that I've seen many people are open about. I mean, in general, money is very taboo, right? But who does that? And also, like my husband says, like men talk about money, but a woman talking about money, right? So I definitely had my fears around it. And I remember I was participating in a speakers bureau training by Momentum, which is, JWRP, a big Jewish, what would we call it? Kind of educational institution programming, right? And I was being trained to become one of their speakers, and they challenged me to give a TED Talk. And I was going to fly to Baltimore to present an 18-minute TED Talk model. It could be in any topic that I wanted. And I had been a public speaker for already many, many years, and I had tons of material that I could speak on. And I was going to look into my files and prepare my 18-minute speech, right? And my husband said, no. You've been wanting to talk about money and Judaism for a long time. This is your chance. And let me tell you, this was the hardest speech that I ever had to write. It took everything out of me, but it became the foundation of everything that I built afterwards. And when I went and I gave that 18-minute talk, in which I spoke about my own journey. It was called From Princess to Pauper, and my own financial roller coaster, and those 3 fundamental things that I spoke about before: giving, bitachon, and values. You could hear a pin drop in the room. And after I finished, literally people cornered me. Like the whole audience was like asking and asking and asking, like they wanted so much more. And I said, okay, God, I got it. I got the message. I have to do this. So that was a really life-changing moment for me that has led me into really understanding I have to do this, even if it's hard, even if it's uncomfortable. I've gone through these experiences for a reason, and I have to help people. And because money is not something that is there to, destroy us or hinder us or destroy our relationships. On the contrary, it's a big blessing. And we have all the tools to have a healthy relationship with it. And if we haven't developed one yet, it's just because we haven't explored the right toolkits.
Absolutely. Yael, first we want to thank you so much for coming on today. How can people find you? How can people get connected with you? I think you gave the title of your book, From Princess to Pauper, was a really good.
You like that one?
Yeah, that's great. Dad, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. I was like, oh, that sounds very interesting. And you could call it like the secret life of a Jewish money coach or something like that. But how can people get connected with you? How can people find you? How can people get involved, go into your training programs, all that?
Absolutely. So I have a signature coaching program called God Wants You to Be Rich. It's for Jewish women. And that is a good title for a book. And that's going to be my book, God Wants You to Be Rich. And it's opening at the end of the year again. It's a live program that happens online. If anybody is interested, they could go to yaeltrusch.com/waitlist and you get the information there and be on the wait list so that you know when I open the doors to that and get exclusive discounts and everything to enroll in the program. You can follow me on the podcast, Jewish Money Matters. It's on every podcast platform. And you can actually email me questions and I answer them once a week on the show on Fridays, yael@yaeltrusch.com. And for anybody who heard us here talking about values and money dates and all these things and is thinking, you know what, I don't really have a healthy way of communicating with my spouse about this. Maybe this money date idea is interesting to me. I have a nice little resource for everybody, yaeltrusch.com/money date. And that's where you're going to find your 10 tips for money date success and a lot of interesting info on what to do if your husband is this type or that type. How do you communicate? How do you get them into the money date? And all sorts of goodies for you.
You need something for the men also. What happens if the wife is like this?
I know.
That's what you need too. What do you mean?
Dad, where is your money date tips? You haven't been doing it. That would be interesting. You can get my dad to crack the code. If my dad can crack the code on how to get the men to get the women involved, that would be good, Dad. Get the reverse role.
That sounds exhausting.
I think my husband is on that, so that might be the next resource.
Is your husband working with you? Is your husband working with you in the same?
It's lend itself to he really works a lot with me in terms of the back end of the podcast and obviously, behind the scenes really, guiding me. But a lot of the coaching that I've been doing one-on-one with some clients, we've been able to bring him in because the masculine perspective is really helpful. Also because he's a mathematical genius. So sometimes we have to get really, really into the, the number crunching. So we don't have anything official out there that says Matt and Yael, but I have to tell you that nobody knows, but the few clients who've used us, privately together that, we actually have been doing it.
That's amazing. So, Yael, thank you so much. And for all of our listeners, I hope you took a lot of value out of this today. I hope you really learned and you really were able to capture what our message is here, how to align yourself with your money, how to think about money differently, how to think of it in more of a positive light and more excited about it. So for all those who have seen Yael, I would implore you to reach out to her, join her programs. It's not a competition with us. It's just everybody can build together. And also reach out to her for one-on-one coaching and look out for her book that God Wants You Rich. God
wants you to be rich.
God wants you to be rich from princess to pauper. Thank you so much everybody for listening. We'll see you on the next one.